Hello everyone, this is Osfour and welcome on this new episode of my masterclass podcast on healing wounds with the Osfour Self Coaching Model. In this new episode, we are going to talk about why it is so important to work on healing your wounds. Okay, so first of all, let's understand what is a wound. So first of all, what we need to understand about human beings is that we are rational beings. And that means that our brain, whatever happens, has to come up with an explanation, right? Our brain doesn't like things that are just random and got no explanation. So it just has to come up with an explanation. Even if it has to invent an explanation, it's going to do it. And to give you an example of that, I'm just going to remind you, not so long ago, there were times where human beings were just, somewhere in the jungle or in a forest, half naked, millions of years ago. And, whenever, there was a storm, and there was lightning in the sky, people didn't understand what was it. They had no words to explain what's going on here. The sky is making noise. There's light in the middle of the night. People didn't understand those things. So somehow they had to come up with an explanation. See, because the brain is not designed to accept things that just happen and that's it, right? This machine is designed to find answers. So one day, there was a guy who was cleverer than anyone else and thought, you know what, I know why the sky is making noise like that in the middle of the night for no reason. It's because the gods are angry. They're angry with us. And so this became an explanation. So after that, he came up with the idea, you know what, I think that if we want to, calm down the gods, we need to do some offerings. So they started to build buildings, and to make, offerings. And then one day there was another guy who was even more clever than the other one and thought, you know what, I think we should do more than offerings. I think we should do human sacrifice. That's it. That's the explanation. And so, there were points in the history of humanity where human beings, used to sacrifice other human beings because they believed that this will calm down the gods, right? But ultimately, all of this comes from a situation which people had no way to understand, and they came up with an explanation, right? So for us human beings is exactly the same, is that when there's a situation, you gotta come up with an explanation. And so this is when your belief system kicks in, right? The only problem is that some of the explanation that you're going to come up with are fine, because they're not going to leave any, they're not going to create any roots, not roots, it's not a word, any wounds, it's the word that I'm searching for. But some other explanation are going to definitely create wounds, something that's going to become hurtful. Because somehow we're not designed as a human being, it is against our nature to believe bad things about ourselves. However, it is something we do very naturally and very often. So that's why you come up with the idea, you know what, dad or mom have done this and this and this and that means that I'm not good enough. My teacher has done this and this and this and that means that, I'm stupid. My mom has done this, and that means that I'm not worthy of love. I'm not interesting, I'm not beautiful, I'm not smart. All of those things that somehow we internalize and we believe about ourselves becomes wounds, right? That's it. And so this is how wounds can be created, based on an assumption, based on a situation that as a kid you had no clue to understand, and you internalize it and you make it mean something bad about you. And it's the same as I said to you on the previous video that I posted last month, but also this month about Henry VIII and the previous month about Catherine of Aragon, is that somehow when Henry VIII wanted to leave Catherine and ask her to divorce, the reason she resisted it, is because she made it mean something bad about her. If my husband is divorcing me, this means I have no value. I'm going to lose all my value based on what his decision is. When, if she could disconnect herself from her own wounds, because there was a wound that was already working even though she didn't know about it. She could have just said, well, that's his choice. Like, got nothing to do with me, right? I don't have to make it mean something about mean something bad about me. But we are only human beings, and that's what we do. Often people make choices, often people do things, and we're going to make it mean something bad about us, and this is when a wound is created. Now the problem is that a wound very quickly becomes a belief system about you. So if I believe that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not worthy, or that I'm not beautiful, or that if I'm not smart, right? Your belief and your brain has to be aligned. This is a law of how we function as a human being. You cannot have a belief and your brain is going to come up with another outcome. It doesn't work like that. So if you have a belief about yourself, about life, about your environment, your brain is going to give you all the proof of that belief. And this is when the vicious circle starts. Because if you believe that you're not good enough, if you believe that you're not valuable, if you believe that you're not smart, which is already very painful on its own, right now, life is gonna, or your brain is gonna create situations that are just gonna attract situations that are just gonna confirm that belief. Because when you believe something, you just gotta have the proof. And that's it. And so this is when you enter a vicious circle. And that is why I say to you, you may not want to work on your wounds, but your wounds are definitely working on you. And when you see situations that keep on reoccurring in yourself, if you're thinking to yourself, why am I always attracting those same toxic people? Why is it my partner always like this or this or that? I mean, the name is changing, but ultimately the situation is the same. You gotta think to yourself, what is the wound that I'm carrying here that attract this person in my life? Right? So once again, you may not want to work on your wounds, but your wounds are definitely working on you. And if I can relate this to the last episode that I've posted on Monday, about Henry VIII, what was so interesting about Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon is that on the first layer, as it is for all of us, you see those two people and you think, you know what, this was just a selfish guy, right, who used this woman for 23 years, and once he was done with it, he wanted a younger woman to have more children with. And this was a woman who was absolutely legit. She wanted, she served that man for 23 years and she didn't want a divorce. Hello? Why she would accept that? This is the first layer you see. Underneath, and that's what I show on the video, I've posted on Monday, is that underneath of that, what you're seeing is a guy who is feeling he's not good enough if he doesn't have, a son, and a woman who feels as though if she divorces, right, with this man who is obviously not respecting her and honoring her, she will lose her value, right? So the reason the situation was so tense between those two, to the point that in the end they just fought for 6 years until he was able to bend rules and do what he wants, until he could throw her away in some old castle, is only because there was a wound that was working on them, that they were not conscious of it, right? And so for him was the fact of not being good enough, and for her not feeling valuable. And the thing is that when you have a wound, right, you can't help to be committed to your wound. You be committed to your wound regardless of all the pain you're causing around you. And it's not because you're a bad person, it's because often you're unconscious of your wounds, right? So working on your self-awareness, to understand, to question yourself, is very important, because that is the only way you can actually find out what is the wound that I'm carrying. What is the thing that I'm being committed? When you go in those places where it hurts. And of course, to face that, it's never easy, but it is worth the work. It is worth the work, because remember, another thing that I always say, and I will keep on saying, is that the job of a wound is not to heal itself. So if you're waiting for it to fall, for the healing to fall from the sky, you're going to wait a long time. Because once the brain is connected to something that hurts inside of you, somehow is going to constantly go and show you all the situation that is just going to press on that wound. And I'm telling you this not because I read it in a book, but I'm telling you this because I've experienced it for myself, right? Is that at some point you got to make the conscious choice to take your brain and say, look, I know this is where you're going, but I want to go this way. And there's a battle with your brain, because it is, if it's a wound that you've been carrying for a long time, it's you know, it's part of your nervous system. Your brain is going to look into these things that are just going to be so hurtful to you just because it's a habit. So you have to take it and decide, this is where we're going. We're going towards healing. I don't want to see this anymore. I get that part. Because the job of a wound is to tell you, look, this thing that happened and it was not okay for me. Remember that. And to be able to take your brain from being wounded and remaining in this vicious circle to be healed, it is a work of self-awareness. It's not going to happen from the, it's not going to fall once again from the sky. You got to be self-aware. And so the model is really teaching you to do those steps where you learn to question yourself, where you learn to go through every steps. And I often say that also, but sometimes one wound can have multiple levels. And so that is why it's so worth to do the work, because you don't know what's working underneath. Like I said to you on the video between Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII, on the first layer you're seeing one thing. On the deeper level, you're seeing two people who are trying to avoid to be hurt. And I think that for me, I think the journey of healing, and I think social media is very much responsible for that, because I often hear this kind of narrative where people are like, well, if you want to change, all you have to do is to change your belief, change your mindset. I was reading this on Instagram the other day, and I thought to myself, listen, a belief system, right, is not a structure that is just hanging there in the air and you just snap your finger and you can just change it. A belief system, especially if it's connected to a wound, it's not that easy to change. If it was, then lots of us would have done it a long time ago, right? So to do the work of self-awareness and to take your time to do that, it makes absolute sense. It's not an easy work. It is a confronting work sometimes, of course. But when you start to see the reward to it, it's a worthy work. It's worthy work because you can start to be your own healer. And that, to me, I think, it's independence. So I think it's very important, and that's why I wanted to take a moment to really explain to you, because in this video that I posted about Henry VIII, I said that very often, that you may not want to work on your wound, but your wound are definitely working on you. And I wanted to take a moment to really explain you that. So you guys, I hope that this video helped you. And until next week, all I'm gonna say to you is peace, love, and light. Bye-bye.